Have a business idea but don't know where to start? Check out Headless Hammerhead's Guide to Entrepreneurship by Giovanni Crisan. Link in the description below.
There it is. Do not falter now. Secure the Khopesh and fulfill your destiny, Calvin. He who believes but does not follow. Save mankind. Rule mankind. On behalf of Nyarlathotep.
Must not let her get it. I love you, Joe.
Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your Inkeeper Vase Odin, and today we'll be talking about Calvin Wright, the Haunted. Calvin Wright has a mysterious past. Once a devotee of some religious sect, submissive to a dark being, he has buried this past and achieved what he describes as clarity. It wasn't through the awakening of the self or a divine intervention, but through serendipity that he found a way out. A beautiful painting that opened his eyes to the beauty of humanity led him to its painter, a man who would eventually become Calvin's beloved, Joao. But the love Calvin had found would not be allowed to exist in harmony, as Calvin's very act of leaving the cult behind would make him the key to finding an ancient artifact. Now known to the two factions as he who believes but does not follow, Calvin had suddenly become important to opposing forces with their own motivations for wielding the powerful Khopesh of the Abyss. The cultists of the ever-burning Cthulhu and the legions of the Dark Pharaoh Nyarlathotep eventually caught up to Calvin in Buenos Aires, where he was almost killed. Rescued, or better said, captured, by an agent of the Dark Pharaoh named Reina Bandera, Calvin would travel to Arkham, specifically the Miskatonic Museum, to retrieve the ancient Khopesh. Reina would keep Calvin safe and alive, despite the ever-burning one's cultist's best efforts, even using supernatural powers to ensure his safety. But at the moment when Calvin had finally retrieved the weapon for Reina and the Dark Pharaoh, he thought of Joao and heroically attacked Reina, who disappeared in a cloud of smoke after being injured, making it clear that he was not interested in ruling mankind, but rather that he was there to defend them. In Arkham Horror the card game, Calvin is a survivor with 6 health and 6 sanity. He has a 0 in every stat. You get +1 willpower and intellect for each horror on Calvin. You also get +1 combat and agility for each damage on Calvin. His Elder Sign effect is a +0, and you can heal 1 damage or horror, or deliberately take 1 damage or horror. His deck building requirements are Survivor and Neutral cards level 0 to 5, and Spirit cards level 0 to 3. His signature card is Until the End of Time. It is a 1-cost asset that does not take up any slots and has a combat and wild icon. It allows you to assign direct damage or horror to it whenever Calvin takes any. This is basically a damage soak to help Calvin survive. Nothing special, although the art on this card is my #1 absolute favorite bit of art from this or any card game. His signature weakness is Voice of the Messenger. When revealed, Calvin must either take a damage and physical trauma or a horror and a mental trauma. This card generally benefits Calvin most of the time, but it does have the potential to outright kill him in the right circumstance. Overall, it's a pretty mild weakness. Now, for deck building, I generally recommend getting some damage soaking cards because they will be your bread and butter to help ensure survival. Cards like Cherished Keepsake and Leather Coat are great, and with a 0 cost are absolute no-brainers. Keeping a few allies in the deck is probably also a very good idea, because you'll probably go through a few in any given scenario. That said, I think Peter Silvestri is a very good choice for Calvin, as the horror healing capability can allow Calvin players to breathe a little more comfortably when the sanity is low. Of note, Ward of Protection is fantastic. Not only is it just an amazing card in any deck, but it gives Calvin a permanent +1 bonus to willpower and intellect due to horror that it deals, in addition to canceling a treachery when you play it. There's really no reason to omit this card, or at least very little reason. Desperate skill cards are also a very popular choice in Calvin, and for good reason. Base stats of 0 all around, Rise to the Occasion can be a very versatile card that can help in many situations. Other than previously mentioned suggestions, I recommend a good mix of skill cards and as much action economy as you can find. For those who don't know what action economy is, it's when a card does something that would normally take 2 or more actions to accomplish. A card like Look What I Found nets you 2 clues for 1 action, something that would normally take 2 or more actions to accomplish. Or Fire Axe, which can deal 2 damage in 1 action, something that would normally take at least 2 actions to do. Calvin is a very difficult investigator to play and build for properly. In fact, I had to reach out to the community to get tips on making him viable, as I've only played him a couple of times, and both times died very quickly and very horribly. The issue with Calvin is that although you can theoretically get amazing stats by the end of the scenario, you'll lose many actions the first few rounds while you purposefully take hits to get your stats going. At least the first few scenarios of a campaign. In later scenarios, when you've got some trauma built up, it does get a little bit easier with him. But that said, while this allows you to ignore some enemies and go about your business and avoid committing cards to some treacheries, there are just some things the encounter deck throws at you that just can't be ignored because they may do more than just damage. Some treacheries can set you back pretty significantly and you may never recover. In addition, being at the threshold of defeat means that if anything doesn't go according to plan, such as a treachery taking away your damage soak all of a sudden, you can lose the scenario in the blink of an eye. The tempo loss at the beginning of each scenario means that you need some major acceleration in order to catch up once you get going, and I'm not sure Survivor has the cards just yet to fully make that a reality. I mean, all 5s for stats is great and all, but how does that help you when you have a 6 health enemy engaged and still need some major catching up, just to finish the scenario? Answer is it doesn't. There are plenty of community members who play Calvin regularly and very successfully, and I recommend you reach out to them for any deck building tips that you seek. I am not one of those, so take my recommendations as a very basic starting point. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you have any tips to add about Calvin, please leave a comment down there. Or if you have any questions, feel free to leave them as well, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Thank you again for watching. This is the Inkeeper Vase Odin, and I'll talk to you all real soon.